Yeah, Vancouver, it's really hot in the day right now and it's really cold at night. So I've been warming up my house by hanging out with ChatGPT and trying to perfect my pizza dough.
Yeah, no, the weather here hasn't been great. It's been raining a lot. I'm hoping that the weather's good on the 22nd, because of course Sean Foyke's coming to Edmonton to the the legislature there, and I'm going to be going. Really excited for that. Definitely going to be on the ground reporting it for True North there, and I don't know. I think there's a lot of protest groups planning to go, so not sure what's going to happen. Like I don't know what the police presence is going to be like. I think it's going to be crazy. Yeah. Have you guys been like paying attention to any of that stuff with Voight?
Of course, yeah. The Live Revive 25 tour, as they call it. I find that really fun. Yeah, there's like a lot of controversy over it. It's a bit like court. Sometimes what happens outside of court is more interesting than what happens inside, right? Which brings us to the decision that was, I believe, dropped today in Alberta court, if I'm not mistaken, and you were in attendance, Isaac.
Yeah, we'll get into that after. But first, we're going to follow a well, a different decision, of course, in Nova Scotia most recently, and of course New Brunswick with the woods bans there. I mean, what's happening over there? Like Alex, what is going on? Can the residents just not go outside? Can they not go in the woods? Like what's going on?
Yeah, it's not, well, as is often the case in Canada, it's not exactly clear what's going on. Our friend of the show, who I actually interviewed earlier this week, Jeff Eively, posted a great video on X where he kind of pointed out the absurd and theatrical elements of the woods ban, where, one section of the woods is the woods, and another section of the woods is apparently not the woods. And so he has taken it upon himself in I think, a fairly heroic case of civil disobedience to say that I'm going to go into the woods and I want you to find me. So he actually reached out to the Department of Natural Resources for Nova Scotia and encouraged them to give him the maximum fine, which was somewhere in the vicinity of $28,720 and some odd cents. And he will be fighting that in court, presumably, with our friends from the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms. So, yeah, pretty
Yeah, and
interesting.
I had heard of other people getting fined. Do you know like how many people have been fined and what's going on there? Because 28 grand, like that is an insane amount of money. I mean, if we know that most Canadians, according to studies, are like 200 or $400 away from not being able to make ends meet. So 28 grand, I mean, who can come up with that kind of money? Like, are a lot of people being fined?
So the last number I heard was 12 people had been fined. I don't know what the average fine is, if they're all being fined the maximum or, somewhere in between. Not entirely sure. I think that's something that's probably important to report on in terms of the interview I did with Jeff Eively is that Eively is not against bans designed to reduce forest fires. So he says, I'm not against burn bans, and I wouldn't even be against, he told me, a ban on bringing lighters or matches into the woods. Because as I posted on X earlier this week, I don't know how many people actually go out into the woods. If you don't have a match or a lighter, it's actually quite difficult to start a fire in the woods. Like, there have been entire shows on this. If you've ever watched Alone or Survivor or any of these shows, it's actually very difficult to start a fire. Without some type of fuel, it's actually very difficult to sustain a fire. So it's not so much that he wants to break the rule because he doesn't care about forest fires. It's because the rule doesn't make sense. That's ultimately, I think, what the biggest issue is with Canadians, and this is what makes it so COVID adjacent. It's kind of like when you had to wear your mask while you waited to get seated at a restaurant, and then when you sat down, you could suddenly take the mask off. There was no science to it at all. It was completely performative, and I think that's the issue here.
And then you said the JCCF is defending him. Is that going to be like? Do you know their position? Are they taking it as this is a violation of charter rights or the Constitution, or what their position is there?
My understanding is that it's going to be a charter infringement position that they're going to be taking if this goes to court. I think also the feeling is that this won't go to court. Again, the ticket itself is also a performative action, right? Because like $28,000, I mean, you also can't squeeze blood from a stone, right? I mean, very few people have $28,000 sitting in their bank account, nor should they. They should probably invest that somewhere. But yeah, that's not something most people can pay. And so I imagine that they won't be enforcing this to the full extent of the law, even though the Premier of Nova Scotia says that he intends to.
Yeah, Walid, have you been paying attention to this? Do you think these tickets are going to get tossed or enforced, or what do you think about the timeline here?
Yeah, just get on what Alex was saying is 12 was the number that Tim Houston quoted in his previous press conference. 12 people have been fined, assumingly around the $25,000 range. Do I think they're going to be taken all the way? Well, for now, Houston's rhetoric says so. He says that he intends to take them all the way, prosecute them fully to make sure consequences are paid up. Again, like you guys have mentioned, people are so close to financial insolvency. Affordability is already a crisis in Atlantic Canada as it is in the rest of the country. So I don't really think anyone actually is going to pay up penny by penny. But the governments are definitely putting all the pressure possible. I mean, that's Nova Scotia with Tim Houston. You're talking about $25,000 as your starting fine. In Newfoundland and Labrador, you have fines between $50 to $150,000, and the result of a default in payment could increase. Well, previously for defaulting in payments of certain fines would get you 3 days in prison or up to 3 days in prison. Now that has been taking up to 6 months in prison. So Newfoundlands are, they're levying jail time, 6 months. Some serious consequence there, of course, and the fine range of $50,000 to $150,000 is just unprecedented. But the story here, guys, is the fact that they're moving goalposts, and that's where they're losing a lot of people, more and more by the day, actually. Between Tim Houston and New Brunswick Premier Susan Holt, between those two individuals, three narratives have been peddled in less than a week. First, with Tim Houston, you had the question about going into forests, starting a fire. Then Susan Holt's like, oh, it's not about starting a fire. It's more so about, you not being in the forest, getting injured, because if you get injured in the forest, we're not gonna come save you. You're abandoned. You're lost. You're done. You're cooked. And then, of course, after that, Tim Houston comes on. He doubles down on the new reason. He's like, oh, it's not about being injured. It's not about starting a forest fire. It's about being there, and the forest fire just happens to start. It's like don't get yourself caught in the forest fire in the first place. So three different narratives between two premiers bordering each other in a week. People are confused. What the hell are they yapping about? And what are they threatening about? I mean, is it not to start fires? Is it to avoid being in a fire? Is it to be, in a rescuable situation if you're injured in the forest? I mean, there's a lot of confusion with the narratives. Consequences are obviously disproportional. People are frustrated, and of course, many people, like some of the activists that are fighting for civil liberties in that issue, like they've said before. I mean, they're all good with taking on preventative measures against forest fires, but of course, when you take this rationale and you change it day by day, week after week, people lose you.
Yeah, no pun intended there with the cooked thing there, Walid, I assume. But yeah, no, just quickly, I just wanted to touch on one thing. So the Nova Scotia thing, you can't go in the forest, whatever. But isn't I thought the Newfoundland thing, Walid, was just more of like a fire ban, which I thought more people would be advocating for because, of course, we've seen the problem with arson in terms of forest fires in Canada, and lots of people have been calling for much, much, much larger punishments when it comes to arson. Because of the forest fires. So is that the key differentiator there between Newfoundland and Nova Scotia? That one, you just can't even go in the forest because you could possibly start a fire, and then one is like you actually just can't have a fire.
So actually, last Saturday's press conference with Premier Andrew Furey, he himself said the penalties, which again, like I said, include minimum fines of $50,000, are applying to anyone that ignores evacuation orders, that enters the restricted zones, or otherwise obstructs firefighting efforts. So I'll let you interpret how that would be.
Yeah. Okay.
Can I add one more thing on this? I think that one of the more interesting elements of this story is the level of outrage. Because as I understand it, this is not totally unprecedented. The government has done this sort of thing before. But people seem to be particularly outraged about it this time around. And I have a bit of a macro psychological theory on what might be happening there. So Justin Trudeau, we dislike him a lot. And he prompted a lot of outrage and anger in Canadians. And nature abhors a vacuum. And so now that Trudeau is gone, that anger and outrage, it has to find a home. It has to go somewhere. And so I think that this forest fire ban and the outrage surrounding it, I don't want to suggest that Jeff Eively's objection to it is superfluous. What I will say, though, is that I find that it fits within a trend of people on the political right in Canada kind of finding ways to vent their outrage that they used to use against Trudeau. So we went from ostriches to Christian rock concerts to forest hiking bands. Like, what do any of these things have in common? And I'm not so sure that they have anything in common other than the fact that people are just looking for a place to vent their rage, so to speak. If you recall, in 2020, our neighbors to the south in the United States, when Donald Trump went out of office in 2020, you saw this very pronounced on the left. Remember, there was always, what is the new thing? So first they were outraged at the unvaccinated. Then they were outraged at Russia. Then they were outraged at, objections to trans people in women's sports and so on and so forth. And so I think that those two things are analogous. And I just thought it was kind of an interesting theory to throw out there that might explain why people are getting so angry over these kind of niche issues recently.
Yeah, decent theory, but of course, when it comes to charter rights and constitutionally protected rights, you can expect, well, you would hope that Canadians would unite against it. But even with this, we haven't seen a united front, more so a divided front with two people or two groups of people taking very strong stances on both sides.
Well, I think it's also an issue that's unique to the Maritimes as well, right? Because I don't know if it has something to do with the fact that they receive so much subsidy from the government in terms of seasonal work, but they tend to have like a more paternalistic approach to the way they view their government, right? They're more accepting of a government controlling what they do. Could you imagine if they tried to do this in BC or Alberta? Like, they'd burn the legislature down. People would be absolutely furious. So, I guess like the Maritimes is a different place and people view their politics very differently there.
Well, speaking of politics, myself and For True North was at Alberta Prosperity Project Town Hall in Edmonton on Tuesday, which featured about 300 attendees live at the town hall there. And I heard around 600 also tuned into the live stream, which was, so this town hall was one of the almost 40 events that they've had in the last 2 months. So like basically every day, guys, they're having a different town hall in some Alberta municipality. And this was, I think, the first one that had been to one of the two major cities, that being Edmonton and Calgary. The other ones have been to like small towns, rural places, but this was the first one in one of the main cities. So the event was about 2 hours long, just over, and it had 3 speakers, the first of whom, Dr. Dennis Modry. Some people may be familiar with him. He's quite a renowned doctor. He, of course, implemented Western Canada's first heart and lung transplantation program and performed the first heart and lung transplants in the 80s and 90s. So he was the first speaker. He talked, all 3 of the speakers kind of talked about similar things in regard to sovereignty. And of course, the second speaker was General Counsel for the APP, Jeffrey Rath, again, a very popular name in modern times. And he also took shots at Ottawa, at Carney, and even he took shots at even Doug Ford. He said, Doug Ford doesn't know anything about oil. He didn't even know Line 5 runs through the States. So yeah, oh wow, to get to the Ontario, oil has to go through the US. He took a shot at Ford saying that. There was lots of things I couldn't possibly summarize what happened at this 2-hour conference quickly. But the third speaker was, of course, Alberta Prosperity Project CEO Mitch Sylvester, and he I guess took a slightly different approach, and he was talking about more or less how Canada was built to work against Alberta, citing equalization payments, pension contributions, Senate representation, Supreme Court justice representation, all things on how Alberta is set up to fail, essentially, in Confederation. He said a few other interesting things, but I also spoke with a couple attendees at the town hall there, one of whom, Catherine Speck, she was a volunteer helping there. And I have a good quote from her. She said, quote, it doesn't seem like the Canada of today is the same as the Canada of my past. I feel we can have a better relationship with Canada once we're independent. That's what I'm hoping and praying for. And then I spoke with another attendee there, Don Bonner. He was a pretty textbook Albertan, I'd say. He's an oil industry veteran for 45 years, and he said he actually felt like a pioneer hitching his wagon going out west, getting involved in this Alberta sovereignty movement. So yeah, no, it was pretty interesting. The town hall, it was, like I said, it was pretty long. So the 3 speakers each spoke for about 30 minutes, give or take a bit more. So that was about 2 hours. I know 3 times 30 is not 2 hours, it's an hour and a half, but we're talking about the extra times in between here. And then they actually had a Q&A session after where people could like submit questions and stuff, but they even cut that short because they were looking around and everyone was like dozing off probably because but you know, everyone was getting pretty tired. It was late at night. So they did cut the Q&A portion short. Yeah, no, what do you guys have any I know you're not in Alberta, but do you have any opinions on the Alberta Prosperity Project town halls and kind of what they've been doing, and just the fact that they're doing like one a day across the province? I mean, it's crazy.
I mean, I'm a kind of an old school self-determination person, I guess. So if Alberta wants to pursue within their legal rights potential independence, I'm all for it personally. I mean, I would tend to agree with many of the sentiments that you just relayed from that event with regards to Alberta being treated very unfairly. I'm even further west than Alberta. This is where you basically abandon your wagon and do fentanyl. So it's even further west than west itself. And I would love for you guys to take us with you. Not to say that I don't love Canada and I don't appreciate this country very, very much, but I definitely share many of the sentiments that Albertans do.
Yeah, and that's another thing they were, I guess, emphasizing at the town hall is that, look, we're trying, or Alberta or the prosperity or the separatist advocates, let's call them, are trying to go down the route of this democratic process wherein if a majority of people want to separate, they will. And they're just trying to say, look, we want to hold these town halls to present you all the information that we have, and you can make the decision for yourself. So it's more of like an informational session. There was lots of data and facts in the presentation. Like, here's how much oil we produce, blah, 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 you know, those kind of things, like the money. Of course, their fiscal costed plan is like 100 pages, 200 pages, whatever. And they have all the analysis in there. And that was referenced slightly at the town hall. But yeah, I mean, it's really just the democratic process of town halls, right? But something else that I attended on Thursday there was the court ruling on the petition question, of course, which many people were looking forward to, let's say. And I don't know, the more or less the judge went through the whole ruling. So he spoke on background and precedent for like an hour, and then the last 30 seconds he delivered his conclusion, which he struck the motion to dismiss the petition, which means it will go forward, or the debates on whether it can proceed will go forward. That means he said that there were legitimate arguments on both sides, and that Albertans deserve to hear both sides of the argument and come to an informed decision. And one of the quotes he said at the end there was, "Democracy deserves nothing less." And then I was talking with a few of the representatives for the Alberta separatist movement, notably, for example, Mitch Sylvester. I talked to him, and he said to me, I think this is important. He actually compared it to Athens, because going forward with this, like, anyone could have tuned in to the court hearing today. It was live streamed, right? And going forward with these hearings, I expect much of the same, where he said, look, this is going to be broadcast for the entire nation. We'll see where they'll see like what our problems are from a separatist standpoint, and we're going to present them. And yeah, he compared it to Athens, back in the day when the public sphere was at its greatest, let's say, where all the citizens just came to the I don't know what it's called, amphitheater, and debated things, and that's really the cornerstone of democracy. Yeah, Walid, did you want to chime in at all? I mean, I'm just ranting here.
Well, look, I looking at Quebec's history, as someone born and raised, well, at least born in Quebec, raised in Ottawa, so I have a very, very local perspective on how separatism has touched and challenged Canada's federalist narrative. Because again, it's a small little river across between Gatineau and Ottawa, and of course the mentalities would change much more radically between those bridges. So on Alberta, and whether or not Alberta has a strong case that I personally respect or that I personally encourage, look, I just think it's purely based on the fact that we've had consecutive Liberal governments while Alberta has rejected their agendas. You have the EV mandates, you have C69, killing pipelines, killing projects, essentially killing Alberta's path to prosperity. Like, yeah, Alberta has still a pretty relatively competitive well-being considering the rest of the country and the state of the country. But if you look at Alberta's top prosperity projection based on if they were to open up more oil markets and increase the capacity of their existing pipelines and perhaps increasing the amount of projects they're going to take on in the future. I mean, the possibilities are endless. Again, for now, they end in Ottawa. So the building of frustration, and this is the funny thing about Alberta. Like, I was at the Freedom Convoy in 2022. I saw the F Trudeau flags. I saw some genuine, authentic cross-country, cross-cultural frustration towards Trudeau and towards the Liberal regime. But when I talk to people from Alberta, I mean, those flags have been around since 2015. So I think the patience is run thin among many, many people. There is a real popular, decently popular now. Is it enough to cross any threshold? I'm not sure. That's something you have to ask someone from the province for now. But I really do believe that the frustration angle about Alberta's contrast in economic priorities, its contrast in economic interests, as you say, they pay into the CPP, federal pension plan, equalization formula, subsidizing provinces of a weaker scale with much less in return on Alberta's behalf. There's a really strong case from Alberta's perspective to consider a rewiring of relations with Ottawa. Again, would that require independence? Would that require a different constitutional process? I'm not sure, but I really much respect the case that Albertans have. The only advice I would say is you have to tie a cultural element into it as well. It can't just be about checks and balances in economics. To last a certain time period, you got to also integrate some cultural considerations. The question of immigration, the question of security, probably public safety can be inserted into that conversation as well. But I find the Prosperity Project, along with the town halls, along with everything else the government and the public are doing, to be of great interest, and I look forward to seeing where it come next year.
Yeah, Walid brought up the Quebec Supreme Court ruling precedent, of which, of course, the judge mentioned a few times. But another thing I found interesting was there's really no Canadian precedent for constitutionally related referenda, specifically whether these referenda could violate the Constitution or not. So a lot of the precedents he drew on are from Europe and the US. But Alex, going forward, well, first of all, do you think Canadians have been paying attention in large to Alberta's sovereignty movement thus far? And do you think that will grow going forward, especially with these court rulings, if they're very public affairs? Do you think people from across the nation are going to be watching?
If I'm being perfectly honest, I would say no. I mean, Canada is a really big country. I just learned recently, if you turned it sideways and you overlapped it over Europe, I think it would stretch from London to Nepal. So, like, that just gives you an idea of the distance between Alberta and the Maritimes, right? I mean, even here in BC, we neighbor. We're probably, I guess, your largest bordering country, if you were an independent country, or tied with Saskatchewan. Not really sure. Even here in BC, like on the street, people are not talking about Alberta independence at all, frankly. And I'm not saying that it's not important. I'm just saying that I think that the interest outside of Alberta is minimal.
Well, we'll see once if a constitutional question or if a referendum question comes forward and if it's voted on, because then this was mentioned a lot in court today too. It's like that's not even really binding in itself. It just triggers a negotiation among, of course, the province, the country, etc. So we'll see. Definitely, once it gets to that stage, I'm sure it'll be the talk of the town, of every town. But we'll have to wait and see for that. Speaking of unity, I guess, we saw some of the Western premiers kind of unite, maybe in against Mark Carney not dealing with China's canola tariffs. That I mean, I saw Wab Canoe. And I don't really know how to interpret what he said because this is such an unbelievable statement. But he said that Western producers are losing or lost $1 billion in a single day because of these canola tariffs. So I don't know if that's just like saying they lost $1 billion over a certain time frame because of the decision of one day, or if they're actually losing $1 billion a day, because that's just insanity. I mean, $1 billion in a day. It's just crazy to me. Yeah. What went on here with the canola tariffs, Walid?
On Web's comments, I'm not sure if he's referring to any specific jurisdiction, if that's the entire country. And again, the magnitude and the timeline matters a lot. But those are his words: $1 billion a day that they're losing based on these canola tariffs, the 75.8% that China slapped on top of some other previous tariffs that China slapped onto Canada's agricultural products, most of whom come from the West as well. So you're not surprised that the West turned premiers, with the exception of David Eby, because I haven't heard anything from him in the last day or two. Wab Kinew, Daniel Smith, Scott Moe have all made it clear that these tariffs need the same attention, if not more, than what the tariff situation that the U.S. is drawing us into. Obviously, this whole elbows up theme, election domination, the focus on both the Liberal Party and their supporters have always been, since perhaps the late last year, have been on U.S. tariffs. But on China, there's a greater effect, frankly, because at least for now, as you and I have covered in previous episodes, Kuzma is saving the game for at least this year on most of our products that are going between the border. So the U.S. tariffs do have an effect, but it's rather minimal. When it comes to China, it comes to a very interesting question, and this is something I probably had a bit of a beef with here at True North with another colleague in the past about what it is that comes out of this situation. So China, as you know, applied these tariffs based on the fact that Canada applies 100% tariffs on imported EVs from the country. This is kind of the way of levying whether or not we will bow down and open up one sector in exchange for another. Obviously, China has a very, very important market influence in our canola exports, so there's definitely a case to be made there. Scott Moe himself, I think he's the one who took the lead when it comes to the rhetorical response, because he had a press conference where he himself said that Carney has to drop the prioritization of the EV industry in Canada. In other words, Scott Moe, a conservative leading premier, is asking Carney to open up the EV market to China in exchange for the canola market to resume its highest potential of trade activity with China, with Beijing. Danielle Smith has also said something similar when she's asked Carney to take similar steps. Scott Moe also asked for him to push, Mark Carney that is, that push for a meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping. And even Manitoba's premier has emphasized the importance of it as well. So there's a cross-spectrum unity there among those three so far. But again, the question remains, is this something that Carney is interested in? First of all, putting a focal point on China's trade reset, if they want to open up negotiations on multiple fronts, because I think we have more than one issue to sort out with China. But on top of that, will the EV question be part of it? I assume so. It will be part of the negotiations, but can you imagine BYD, China's main EV company, pumping out cars on Canadian streets? I mean, that would be very interesting for one. So if that's the exchange, canola for Chinese EVs, for now, it seems like Scott Moe and Western premiers are in favor of that move.
Yeah, Walid, it just seems a bit, I don't know, compelling, contradictory to me that the Liberals have this EV net zero mandate, meaning they want us or are going to force us to all drive electric vehicles, but at the same time are tariffing China EVs. So I don't understand that. Like, do you want us, because that in theory, if there's more competition in the market from China with EVs, all the EVs would go down in price. So why is that? These things just seem too that they're colliding too heavily. I don't get it at all. How are you trying to push EVs onto Canadians, but also tariffing EVs from other countries?
Well, China is a special case. I mean, the US and Canada have been trying to push China out of the EV market as well, the car making market overall, regardless. There are many reasons for that. I mean, China, as you know, has a much cheaper cost of labor, much cheaper cost of production of those vehicles. It can absolutely flood the market. And they've already done this before when it comes to many products that we buy in every day and products that perhaps we don't want to buy every day. China has a record with surveillance and perhaps a bit more hostile behavior. When you're dealing with Chinese companies, are often dealing with the state via proxy as well. Huawei is a perfect example of that. We wouldn't want Huawei running our infrastructure to do with our 5G networks across the country. Perhaps similar concerns could pop up if, let's say, BYD becomes a key critical component of our charging networks in the country. And of course, with these electric cars, you're also talking about electric vehicles. We're talking about smart electric vehicles. I don't know if you guys have ever been in a BYD vehicle, but I have. And I know for a fact that these resemble what Teslas like to offer: computerized systems, automation, network connection systems, just a lot of technology in the vehicle that you wouldn't expect from anywhere else besides a Tesla. So again, there are multiple concerns, but I think on the economic front, it's more to do with, again, China's disparity of production and quality costs, whereas over here in Canada and North America, especially with the ongoing auto tariffs we're getting from the US, I think it would be very hard on automakers here at home. Now, again, the question here remains, and this is going to be a very conservative question, because the conservatives have always been, let's just say in recent times, the more hostile, the more skeptical of China party or wing in Canadian politics. But I think this is one of the exceptions where they might be willing to give up the whole anti-Beijing sentiment on electric cars if it means continued expanded trade on agriculture, which their provinces obviously rely on. So I think there's a very unique formula here for the conservatives to warm up a bit more to, let's say, Chinese trade, maybe not Chinese, diplomatic or political relations, but more so to open up with more trade on Beijing on the electric vehicle front, again, in exchange for a critical bargaining chip. So that's going to be a question that Carney has to answer in the next couple months, and seeing whether or not he takes the Chinese question very seriously. But there is a geographic disparity of priority here. The West cares more about this than any other part of the country. So this will be Carney's opportunity to win back some support in a region that probably doesn't like him so much.
Yeah, Alex, I just wanted to get your thoughts there, specifically on, let's call it Carney's theatrics, that being that he's focused so much on Trump, of course, despite the fact that Kuzma goods, 93% of which are exempt from tariffs. But of course, now China is going to obliterate our canola industry, and our food prices are already through the roof, and this is only going to make things worse. So yeah, what do you think about, I guess, the performativeness of it all, and how serious this threat from China should be taken by Carney?
Well, I'm not very knowledgeable on the subject, to be perfectly honest, so I don't really have much to say about it, but I did have some follow-up questions. I think they're kind of in the same realm of the questions that you were asking, Walid, because I think that he's, kind of taken the lead on this subject.
Yeah.
So why? I understand the notion that China has cheaper labor and cheaper components, so that therefore they could flood our market. But the federal government has also said that they want to have no gas-powered vehicles by 2035. So what could the logic possibly be for them not wanting the market to be flooded with cheap electric vehicles? It seems like that would be kind of the path of least resistance to
That's what I was
stated
saying.
goal. Are they unsafe? Like, do they they are made in China? Like, are they run on lead paint, or like?
One thing I will say briefly, Alex, is just I remember a video. Someone was, I think they were talking to Elon, and I don't recall exactly what the situation was, but there was some controversy, and they said, "Why don't you just shut their cars off? Like he has the power to do that.
Right.
You understand? He could just shut off all the Teslas, and you can no longer drive." So imagine if every person in Canada drives some Chinese-made vehicle, and they
And
could
I assume
control
it's
that
not.
infrastructure. They could shut down your vehicle. I mean, this is
And Walid, you probably can confirm this. I assume that there's not really a true arm's length relationship between BYD and the Chinese Communist Party.
It's the same as Tencent and the same as ByteDance.
Right.
It's one of the same by proxy, you could say.
Mm-hmm. So is that the concern? Is it a security concern, or what's the logic here?
The question here is who you're asking. So there's a public concern and there's a political concern. What I read from the public is the debate, perhaps on the social media forums and the public sphere, is that BYD is an arm of the Chinese regime. The Chinese regime presents itself hostile in a hostile fashion to Canada. Of course, the past proves that. I don't think there's an argument there. The argument remains is, okay, well, China has a certain level of leverage in Canada. It has a very important relationship with Ottawa and vice versa. Canola being one of those tools, and that's what they've been living so far this year. That's hurt a lot of the Western provinces. Western provinces, the more conservative leaning end of the country, which normally would have a much more hostile and skeptical view towards China, all of a sudden they find their interest in trying to warm up to one Chinese industry, one Chinese company. So, and again, in this quid pro quo format, on the political angle, you have Mark Carney, who has, in past months since becoming prime minister, said that he wants to, quote, reset relations with Beijing, whatever that means. I mean, you guys remember from the election, he had a candidate, or two candidates in the same riding, actually, that were very much of a heritage of, pro-CCP individuals. He's also taken a much more friendly approach when it comes to the question of India as well. So I think part of his narrative would make sense to move in that direction, because he said to himself, we have to look for alternatives beyond the US. Asian trade relations are critical for Canada's economy, China being perhaps the biggest out of all. So I'm not sure what is stopping Ottawa from making that move. What I am very interested to see is how conservatives, the opposition on a federal level and across the provinces in the West navigate that issue given their historical skepticism of China? That's what I'm really curious about.
Polyev actually spoke about it today. He did a press conference in Saskatchewan, and he had mentioned the fact that it's absurd that we would have this 100% tariff. Well, I don't know if he made the connection, but he said, I'm making the connection. It's absurd to have this 100% EV tariff on Chinese EVs, and meanwhile, we are procuring all of our shipbuilding to China. We're giving them a $1 billion taxpayer loan to build our ferries. So we will take their ferries, but we won't take their electric vehicles, even though it's a mandated goal of this government to switch us all to electric vehicles. I can't seem to untangle that, but
I see the
Seems like
connection there. I see the connection there. Sorry to interrupt. I see the connection there between the EV question and the shipbuilding question. Actually, the BC Conservative Party just released a letter recently calling on the premier to fire the CEO of BC Ferries. So that's something that we're going to see coming up in the near future more and more. Skepticism and opposition towards that deal, that $1 billion shipbuilding deal with the Chinese state-owned shipbuilding company. However, I think the connection that Polyev has been making is one of the canola tariff issue, that China is acting in a hostile fashion on trade, yet we're rewarding Chinese companies with the BC contract. So I think that's the link that Polyev, I've seen him make that link before. He made that link. I wrote that in the article as well. So I think that's kind of where he's headed towards in that rhetorical direction. But I also equally appreciate that connection as well between, on the EV issue, well, we're supposedly so sold on EVs. It doesn't make sense. You got to pick a side here.
Okay, yeah. Seems like none of us can
make heads or tails out of it.
Yeah, none of us understand how this contradiction can be, but something else we might not understand is when to cross the street, apparently. So yeah, can we roll that clip right away?
These last guys that are running. Hey, bud. Hey, excuse me. Hi, it's the police. How are you? A lot of the pedestrians don't realize they're supposed to only step off when it's that. Yeah. When they start the running thing. Yeah. So next time, just wait for the light for me, okay? Okay. Hey, how you doing? Hi, it's Vancouver Police. I'm just doing some education. You stepped off when we were here, when the numbers were going onto the street. So it's for your safety, but it's also to keep the traffic moving, and cars can't turn because they're waiting for you. And it's on every sign. It's on every pole. Okay. You already know, because I can tell you're laughing. We're just trying to keep you safe. Nobody's in trouble. Enjoy your stay.
Okay.
You have dinosaurs?
Well, put it right here.
Yeah, you know what I mean?
Fair enough. Nope, that's
Thanks.
a good comment.
Appreciate it. Have a great day.
So I was just scrolling through my Instagram and I saw this kind of like public service announcement type thing from the Vancouver Police Department. I want to be very clear. I think that any type of civil engagement between the police and the public is generally a good thing. I like to speak on my own behalf, but I believe as an organization, we're a Back the Blue organization. We appreciate the police. They're important first responders, and we need them in order to have a functioning society. But Vancouver is barely a functioning society. And that's what I think has drawn so much outrage from this video. Because if you go like 4 blocks south of there, you are actually allowed to smoke crack and fentanyl. There are people dying on the streets. There are stranger attacks too daily, is the current statistic. What are we doing? What is this?
Yeah, when you say there, Alex, that any type of civic engagement is good, I mean, that's a nice sentiment in theory, assuming you have unlimited resources. But if you only have X amount of officers and they can only perform X amount of tasks, then those tasks should be carefully selected. And I don't know how this was one that was selected, because people running across the street before, it's not even jaywalking, sorry, before the thing, like this is ridiculous. Although, to be fair, I didn't even know about this rule. I've been crossing the street wrong my whole life, I guess. When there's like 10 seconds left, I walk across. But yeah, just to know that on the street corner where this was filmed, there was probably like 10 people laying down, doing fentanyl, smoking crack. I mean, it's absolutely unbelievable. Surely the police have better things to do. Even when I'm driving in Edmonton these days, I'm like, oh, a cop won't pull me over if I'm speeding a bit. They have better things to do. Like, sorry, there are bigger crimes to worry about than jaywalking. I mean, as I said, not even jaywalking, like crossing. I mean, I don't even know what you would call this.
Yeah, it's completely absurd. I mean, I don't want to give myself away too much, but I lived in Greece for a while, and in Greece, everybody jaywalks. There's no crosswalk. People just
No, it's
jaywalk all over the place. It's like that in any developing country. Vancouver, I would say, like especially that downtown core, is basically a third world country when you get to certain parts. If you went down to like East Hastings, is he actually going to hand out jaywalking tickets? He should. I mean, but those people are so zombified. The other thing that I found really amusing about this video, I know exactly where that video was taken. And that's a transit hub for students. I went to UBC, and that's one of the places where you pick up the 99D line, which takes you to the UBC campus. So he's just harassing kids that are going to school. And like, I'd also be curious to know how many people he spoke to that could not speak English. Right? Because when I went downtown to do that question where I asked people if they knew who the prime minister was, the biggest struggle was finding people who spoke English. So
I got a funny something
dumbfounding.
funny came to mind, Alex, when you were talking about this. Of course, I was in court today, so I parked like 2 blocks away in this park, and to get to the court, I had to cross two avenues, and you have one option: go to the main street, which is like a bit away, and then wait for the light and cross, or just cross the avenue. And in both these avs, there's like cops all over the place, because you're right beside the court. So I jaywalked both times in front of police, and they didn't care. Even the first time I did it, when I'm going to court, this cop was literally walking right in front of me, and he like looked me in the eyes as I'm jaywalking, and I looked at him, and I was like, is this guy gonna give me trouble? Didn't even say anything, because these people have bigger concerns to worry about. Probably the crack addicts, like 1 block away, are bigger weight on their minds than some guy jaywalking to go to court to cover the petition referendum.
Well,
But I mean, yeah, this is
what
an
happens.
insane. Yeah.
If you make everything legal, which is what Vancouver has done, basically, this is all you're left with, right? In terms of enforcing the law. If you allow people to do drugs and you allow people to commit stranger attacks and then be released on bail the next day, so what's the point in even arresting them? Then the only thing you're left with is almost jaywalking. In which case, it begs the question, why even have police at all? And isn't this also the job for bylaw officers? Like, why are the police doing this? The police should be dealing with crime.
Yeah, Walid, are you gonna make any changes to how you cross the street there?
Look, I think every city has its own culture when it comes to this issue. I mean, I have no issue with taking some safety concerns around schools and places where children are involved, where people are playing on the streets. I mean, absolutely, both drivers and pedestrians alike have to take certain precautions. But this video is, this crosses a line of just stupidity, frankly. I mean, you have the situation in Vancouver where public safety is a second thought in most situations. Drugs, crime, robberies, people attacking strangers, random attacks, not things that are provoked through intimate relations or known gang affiliations. We're talking about random people being attacked randomly by people they've never met before, happening all over the downtown core. That really takes me off a certain way. That this is an example of police public engagement, but this is an example of a very tone deaf police public engagement. I mean, I don't think they're reading the room very well when it comes to what the public's concerns are. And like Alex said, I mean, this looked to me like a very student-heavy area, a very international student-heavy area. As you know, UBC is home to thousands of international students, many of them come from Asia, and that looked like kind of the pure demographic in the video seemed to be of that case. So probably a few times they've encountered people that didn't speak that much English, and of course came from a little bit of a different culture when it comes to the issue of jaywalking and everything else. But I don't think I'm going to be changing my habits anytime soon. I think the rule, frankly, is go according to your comfort zone. I mean, if you're in the cross, wow, you have the right to cross. I mean, it can be 3 seconds, it can be 10 seconds. Once you're in, you're in. You feel fine. You don't have to run. I mean, I try my best to make sure I know where I'm going and that I'm visible in front of cars, So I don't think I'm going to be buying too much into that message. I think it's a bit too draconian for my needs.
Yeah, when I first saw this clip, I was just really struggling to determine whether it was an SNL skit or a legitimate police video, which I feel has too often become the case in Canada these days, and maybe especially in BC. It's just so many of the things we see, guys. It's just like, surely this is satire, because this just can't be how the world is. But it is how the world is, and it was my pleasure to discuss this today with my colleagues from True North, Walid Tamtam and Alex Zoltan. I'm Isaac Lamoureux, and remember, everything you heard today was off the record. Yeah, like you said, Alex, I mean,
It's ridiculous.
This rule, like I said, I've been crossing the street wrong my whole life. Reminds me of a couple years ago, my grandma, I'm leaving her house and I'm shoes wrong, and I was like a grown adult, and so I was like, oh, I've been tying my shoes wrong this whole time. Although in that case, I think I was actually tying my shoes right, and I guess in this case too, I think I've been crossing the street just fine.
Well, I'm a serial jaywalker. I don't mind admitting that. I jaywalk all the time, like really bad, because I don't really drive very often either, because I'm in the city. So I have like very little empathy for the drivers, So I'm that like jaywalker everybody hates. I'm not going to change my behavior based on this.
Now that I think of it, a policeman
it makes me want to jaywalk more.
A policeman did give me grief like 10, 15 years ago for jaywalking. I was downtown Edmonton just getting off the subway, and I just jaywalked, and a cop was there, and he's like, hey, man, you shouldn't do that. I could give you a ticket, this and this. He's citing all these tickets, not just jaywalking, but obstructing traffic, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, sorry, man, I won't do that again.
Same thing happened to me in Montreal, of all places. And Montreal's notorious for jaywalking. And I just said, I was distracted by all the beautiful buildings. And he's like, oh, very nice.
You're free to go.
I mean, Montreal's loaded with construction everywhere, so frankly, sometimes you can't even cross on the crosswalk. The crosswalk is, half occupied by. I mean, again, every city has its culture. I mean, if you're jaywalking on high speed, 80 kilometer per hour, half rural, half urban, long road across the city, okay, yeah, you definitely got to be careful. Take yourself at your own ability to cross, and of course, watch out for traffic. But I mean, in this case, we're not talking about actual jaywalking. We're not talking about dealing with oncoming traffic. We're talking about when you already have the right of way and you got like a little bit of time left. And it's just, I feel like the hesitation that people might actually, if people actually follow this advice as per advertised,
yes,
I think people will find themselves reluctant to enter or not. And I think it creates potential danger possibly, because if you're hesitating and then you end up actually going in the end, going 2, 3, 4 seconds later, instead of heading on the gas pedal, and perhaps, you're in more likelihood to startle the drivers. Again, remember, everyone has their foot on the brake here, and everyone's going to rev up the engine before anything happens. So I think there's a bit of
Walid, I think you hit the nail on the head when you said this is just tone deaf, right? Like if we had a crisis of pedestrians being struck by vehicles, right, maybe this public service announcement would make some sense, but I'd say that this is pretty much the tip of the iceberg as far as issues in Vancouver are concerned.